The story of Foolio's final days is sending shockwave through the hip-hop community, leaving fans struggling to reconcile what they thought they knew with the shocking reality behind closed doors. For months, rumors swirled about his lifestyle, his mindset, and even the state of his relationships. But insiders are now revealing that none of it was as straightforward as the public assumed. What many imagined as drama-filled, reckless, or chaotic was, according to sources close to him, far more complex, private, and, in some ways, heartbreaking. Foolio was more than just his music. Behind the flashes, studio sessions, and viral moments, he was a young man navigating pressure, expectations, and personal demons that fans rarely got to see. Those who knew him best say the final weeks of his life were marked not by chaos but by reflection, connection, and a struggle that wasn't visible in headlines or social media posts. Moments that appeared inconsequential to the public were actually intense, emotional, and deeply personal. What's even more surprising is how different the reality was from the narrative fans built. Online speculation painted a picture of wild parties, constant conflict, or an inevitable downfall, but friends and collaborators paint a far more nuanced portrait. Late-night studio sessions weren't just about music. They were moments of bonding, planning, and even confession. Calls with family weren't casual. They carried weight, messages, and sometimes final words that would later take on a haunting significance. In this video, we'll break down what really happened in Foolio's last days. From behind-the-scenes accounts to sources who were present in those final moments, we'll uncover the human side of a story too often reduced to headlines. The truth is complicated, emotional, and sometimes hard to process, but it's nothing like fans imagined. Stay tuned as we reveal the timeline, the conversations, and the shocking insights that show Foolio's last days weren't just news. They were a window into the real life behind the persona. By the end, you'll see a story that challenges everything you thought you knew about this rising star. Fans are left questioning, reflecting, and mourning, not just the music, but the person behind it. This isn't the end of the conversation. It's the beginning of understanding the full picture. The last days of Foolio's life were far removed from the drama and chaos fans often imagined. While headlines and social media speculation painted him as caught in a whirlwind of conflict and recklessness, those closest to him tell a very different story, one that reveals vulnerability, reflection, and moments of connection that rarely made it to the public eye. For many, Foolio's persona was larger than life, a rising rap star with a magnetic presence, a sharp tongue, and a fearless attitude. But behind that public image, he was dealing with pressures and struggles that were invisible to most. According to insiders, the week leading up to his final days was filled with long studio sessions, phone calls with family, and private discussions with close friends. These sessions weren't the wild, unstructured chaos that fans imagined. Instead, they were focused, intense, and often contemplative. Foolio reportedly wanted to leave a lasting impact, not just with his music but with the relationships that mattered most. Conversations with family members were reportedly filled with honesty and, in some cases, final advice or reflections that carried weight. He seemed aware of how fleeting life could be and took those interactions seriously. Studio time, which outsiders often imagined as loud, flashy, and filled with distractions, was described as almost sacred. Collaborators say that Foolio was focused on refining tracks, experimenting with sounds, and sharing ideas with those he trusted most. Music, for him, wasn't just a career, it was a medium through which he expressed emotions and reconciled with personal challenges. Some tracks he worked on during those last days were reportedly deeply introspective, revealing thoughts and feelings he hadn't shared publicly. The intensity in the studio wasn't about competition or ego. It was about creation, connection, and leaving something that would outlast him. Even casual moments carried significance. Sources describe conversations during meals, walks, and downtime as moments where Foolio reflected on his choices, his relationships, and his future. There were jokes and laughter, but also an undercurrent of seriousness. People close to him noticed that he was weighing decisions carefully and prioritizing relationships that mattered. His interactions with friends weren't the casual, carefree moments outsiders assumed. They were deliberate, meaningful, and at times, emotional. The contrast between what fans believed and what was happening in reality couldn't have been starker. While social media focused on rumors of conflict or dangerous behavior, Foolio was quietly grappling with life's challenges, seeking to strengthen bonds and leave a meaningful imprint. Those around him sensed a change, a seriousness in his demeanor that suggested he was aware of how fragile life could be. Far from reckless, these days reflected a young artist trying to navigate a complex world with as much thought and intention as he could muster. By the end of that week, those who knew him best say that Foolio's presence, energy, and conversations left an impression that was both inspiring and tragic. The person behind the music, the persona, and the headlines was more complex than fans imagined, filled with reflection, care, and the weight of his own humanity. This was not a story of chaos. It was a story of someone facing life honestly, even in ways that most would never see. In the days following his final studio sessions, Foolio's circle began to notice patterns that few outsiders would have guessed. Friends and collaborators described him as unusually introspective, even for someone accustomed to the pressures of the music industry. He wasn't avoiding the outside world, but he was selective about the people and interactions he engaged with. Every conversation seemed purposeful, every meeting calculated. It wasn't cold or distant, it was intentional. He wanted to make sure that the energy he shared was with those who mattered most, those he trusted, and those who could influence him positively in a period of heightened stress and uncertainty. One of the most revealing aspects of these days was how Foolio approached communication with family. Sources close to him said he spent hours on the phone, often revisiting conversations about life choices, priorities, and the future. These weren't superficial check-ins. They were honest dialogues where he expressed concerns, shared fears, and, in some instances, gave advice that reflected the maturity he had developed over years navigating fame at a young age. For those family members, these conversations were striking. They revealed a side of Foolio rarely seen by fans. The thoughtful, caring, and deeply reflective young, while the public imagined him engulfed in drama or reckless behavior. Insiders revealed that Foolio had been grappling with his own mortality and the consequences of his choices. Every decision he made, from who he spoke to where he went, to how he spent his time in the studio, carried weight. It said that he had a heightened awareness of vulnerability, perhaps due to the dangers that surround anyone in the public eye. Rather than spiraling into carelessness, he became more deliberate, more conscious of his surroundings, and more invested in protecting the people he loved. The music itself became a vessel for his emotions. Sources indicate that Foolio's final recordings reflected his internal struggles, blending raw honesty with artistic precision. He was experimenting with lyrical themes that hinted at vulnerability, regret, and reflection, elements that fans wouldn't fully understand until after the fact. Collaborators recall sessions where he would pause mid-verse, reflect on the words, and insist on perfecting the delivery to ensure it carried the intended weight. This wasn't simply artistry. It was a way for him to process emotions he couldn't voice elsewhere. Another revealing aspect was his interaction with friends in casual settings. Contrary to rumors of wild nights or reckless partying, these moments were often subdued yet meaningful. Even when laughter and camaraderie filled the room, there was an underlying tone of seriousness. Those closest to him noticed he had begun to weigh his time carefully, consciously deciding which connections were worth nurturing and which were best kept at a distance. It was a side of him that was pragmatic and self-aware, far removed from the chaotic image portrayed online. Fans had imagined his last days as a blur of attention and headline-making events, but the reality was profoundly different. They were private, intentional, and filled with small, significant moments that reflected his internal state. From the studio to phone calls, to time spent with trusted friends, every action carried purpose. Far from reckless, these days were a reflection of someone navigating fame, pressure, and personal challenges with a rare level of awareness. In the critical stretch leading up to Foolio's final days, the environment around him became a mix of tension, reflection, and calculated planning. Sources close to him emphasized that he was acutely aware of the dualities in his life: the public persona that fans adored and scrutinized, and the private person who carried the weight of his choices. Every interaction, every decision, and every moment of downtime seemed to be evaluated through that lens. For those observing him closely, it was clear that he was attempting to reconcile the pressures of fame with a need for personal growth, protection, and preparation for what might come next. One of the most significant aspects of this period was how Foolio handled his close relationships. While many expected emotional outbursts or erratic behavior, insiders report that he prioritized honest communication. Friends, collaborators, and confidants described him as reflective, often asking pointed questions about loyalty, trust, and intentions. These weren't casual chats. They were deliberate conversations meant to establish clarity. He was assessing who was supportive, who could be trusted, and who might create problems down the line. This discernment demonstrated a level of foresight rarely attributed to someone his age and in his circumstances. The studio remained a central focus, but the atmosphere was far from the frenzied, party-like scenes often imagined. Collaborators recall long hours of concentrated work, with Foolio constantly refining verses, adjusting beats, and discussing lyrical content in a manner that revealed deep introspection. There were moments when he would step back, reflect on the emotional weight of a track, and insist on perfecting every delivery. Music had become a mirror for his thoughts, a medium through which he could confront vulnerabilities and share perspectives he couldn't openly discuss elsewhere. In addition to professional diligence, Foolio's private routines took on a new significance. Walks, calls, and even brief social interactions were imbued with purpose. He seemed hyper-aware of time, safety, and the lasting impact of his words and actions. Those ND him noticed a seriousness and a reckless image often portrayed on him. This wasn't the behavior of someone spiraling out of control. It was the behavior of someone managing a life under extreme-where of potentiators and attempting to make sense of a complicated reality. Family connections also played a profound role during these days, converging behind, not just in news, but in the form of meaningful interactions and guidance for those he cared about. The depth of these connections highlights the human side of a figure often reduced to headlines and speculation. Social media, rumors, and public speculation did little justice to these final days. While fans imagined drama, chaos, and impulsive behavior, the reality was quiet, deliberate, and filled with personal reflection. Every call, every session, every choice carried intention and insight. These were not the last days of someone lost in the spotlight. They were the last days of a young man trying to navigate the pressures of fame, relationships, and self-awareness with as much clarity as he could muster. As Foolio's final days progressed, the intensity of his private world deepened, revealing layers that fans could never have anticipated. While the public focused on the headlines and snippets of gossip, those who were actually present during these last moments saw something far more profound. A young artist consciously navigating the pressure of fame, personal relationships, and his own inner struggles. There was a pattern to his days, a rhythm of work, reflection, and selective interaction that illustrated just how deliberate he had become in managing both his life and his legacy. Studio sessions continued to dominate his schedule, but they were markedly different from what outsiders imagined. There were no wild parties, no reckless escapades, just long hours of concentrated creativity. Collaborators noted how he immersed himself completely, analyzing every lyric, every beat, and every hook. More than just music, these sessions became an emotional outlet. He poured unspoken thoughts and fears into his work, expressing vulnerability that he rarely allowed in public. Songs that were recorded in these sessions, according to those closest to him, reflected a depth and emotional honesty that would only become clear after his passing. Each verse was a testament to his awareness of life's fragility, a glimpse into the mind of someone grappling with challenges few could imagine. Even in moments away from the studio, Foolio's approach was deliberate. Calls with family were mowed, meaningful, and at times intensely reflective. He wasn't simply checking in. He was communicating guidance, reassurance, and sometimes final pieces of wisdom. Friends WH spent time with him during these days described conversations that were emotionally charged but grounded in thoughtfulness. There was laughter, yes, but always tempered with a gravity that underscored his awareness of the fleeting nature of time. Those who expected impulsive or reckless behavior were confronted with a person who was more calculated, more cautious, and deeply invested in the well-being of those around him. Another aspect of these days that stood out was how he assessed his environment and relationships. Foolio reportedly became selective about the people he spent time with, prioritizing those who could provide support or positive influence. Casual encounters, once taken lightly, were now approached with awareness. He seemed to understand that at this stage in his career and life, missteps could carry serious consequences, not just for himself, but for those connected to him. Far from careless, he moved through spaces with intent, balancing visibility with safety and personal integrity. This period also shed light on the emotional weight he carried. Despite the confidence projected publicly, insiders saw a young man wrestling with pressures most people can't fathom. Expectations from fans, the weight of rapid fame, and the scrutiny of an ever-watchful media. Rather than succumbing to chaos, he processed these pressures through reflection, creativity, and selective engagement. It was a level of awareness and responsibility rarely attributed to someone his age in such a high-stakes environment. The reality of Foolio's last days contrasts sharply with the narrative fans imagined. It wasn't a blur of recklessness or scandal. It was a carefully navigated time filled with intentional actions, deep conversations, and emotional processing. The decisions he made, the moments he prioritized, and the energy he invested in meaningful interactions all reveal a complexity that social media could never capture. These days show a human side of Foolio that fans had overlooked, thoughtful, deliberate, and painfully aware of the transient nature of life. In the final chapter of Foolio's last days, the culmination of reflection, intentionality, and emotional weight became unmistakable. Those who were close to him recall a young man acutely aware of the impact of his choices, not just on himself, but on everyone around him. What the public perceived as chaos or recklessness was, in reality, a series of deliberate actions aimed at preserving relationships, expressing himself through music, and confronting the pressures of fame head-on. Every interaction, every phone call, every studio session carried a significance that fans could never fully grasp from the outside. One of the most striking elements of this period was how he balanced personal relationships with professional obligations. Friends and collaborators noticed that he was extremely intentional about who he spent time with, ensuring that each encounter had purpose. Whether it was a casual conversation, a collaborative session, or simply checking in with family, he approached everything with mindfulness. The trust he placed in those around him was selective, reflecting a deeper awareness of loyalty, influence, and the responsibilities tied to being a public figure. Even small moments, like a conversation in a hallway or a shared laugh in the studio, were imbued with meaning because he understood how fleeting time could be. The music he created during these days became a mirror of his inner world. Collaborators described the sessions as emotionally charged yet controlled, with Foolio often pausing mid-verse to reflect on the impact of his words. Lyrics that had previously been dismissed as typical bravado took on layers of introspection, regret, and hope. The creative process became both a coping mechanism and a form of communication, allowing him to articulate feelings he couldn't express openly in conversation. This artistic expression was a way to leave a legacy that extended beyond fleeting social media moments or public perception. Family connections remained central. In private, Foolio was open, vulnerable, and deeply reflective. He discussed personal struggles, expressed gratitude, and offered guidance in ways that were rarely seen by outsiders. These interactions revealed a side of him that was compassionate, aware, and deeply human. Friends noted that these conversations often lingered with them long after they ended, carrying an emotional resonance that no headline or viral clip could capture. Despite the gravity of these final days, Foolio's personality still shone through. Humor, warmth, and camaraderie remained present, even as the weight of reflection and awareness grew heavier. This combination of lightness and depth made his final days profoundly human, filled with laughter, tears, serious reflection, and intentional action. He was neither reckless nor detached. He was navigating life with intention in a world that rarely allowed for nuance. The stark contrast between public perception and reality underscores the tragedy of misunderstanding someone's life based solely on rumors, viral clips, or social media commentary. Foolio's last days were not defined by the chaos fans imagined, but by deliberate choices, emotional honesty, and the effort to leave a meaningful impact. In the end, the story of these days challenges the narrative that the world often constructs around young artists, reminding us that there's always more behind the image than what the public sees. If this story gave you a new perspective on Foolio, don't let it stop here. Hit subscribe to stay updated on the real stories behind the headlines, and give this video a like if you want more behind-the-scenes insights that fans rarely get to see. Drop a comment below sharing your thoughts. Were you surprised by what really happened in Foolio's last days? Share this video with friends who think they know the full story. And remember, sometimes the truth is far more complex than the rumors. Stay tuned, because the story doesn't end here.